let's jump in and start writing some HTML code. So we're going to start in a very simple text editor called Notepad. If you're on a PC, if you have a Mac, you're going to use TextEdit. And on Blackboard, you're going to need to download this text, Black Goose Text. Download that and open it up so we can use that text. I'm also going to add on here, it's not at the moment, but you'll see it by the time you get to hear this. I have like a little PowerPoint, or I'll probably put it as a PDF. Also, if you want to just follow along the steps for that as well, you can do that. So before we ever start to make a web project or a web page, we're always going to set up a folder first. I want you to do this for all your class assignments. So I'm going to go into my folders, and I'm already in my web art design folder, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just right clicking, and I'm going to call this Black Goose, because that's the name of the restaurant. Oh, I need to rename this. So that's where I'm going to be, Black Goose. That's where I'm going to be saving my practice from this exercise. All right, and now the next thing is I'm going to open up Notepad. I have it open here, and I have a blank page, and I'm going to just give the page a basic HTML outline. So I'm going to start with putting my opening and closing HTML tags. So I'm going to go down a bunch of steps and put in my closing. Then I'm going to put in my head tags and my closing one. Okay, so as I mentioned in the previous video, this is where the CSS would go. So not the content. There's just one exception. It's the title tag. The title tag is going to affect what we're going to see in the tab of the browser window. So actually, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to put that there in a minute. And then the tag, the body tag, is the one we're going to be putting all of our content between. So I have my opening and closing body tag. All right, I'm going to make a little space in between here. I'm going to go over to my Black Goose restaurant text. It's already selected. And I'm going to copy it all just using keyboard shortcut Control-C. And I'm going to paste it between my opening and closing body tag. Okay, and now let's save this. I'm going to do File, Save As, and I need to browse for that folder, my Web Art Design folder, Black Goose, and I'm going to choose All Files, and I'm going to call it home.html. I need to add the .html to make this a web page. And hit Save. Okay, so it's now here in Notepad, but I want to open up that folder. It's already there for me. Magic. I open up my folder, browse for it if you need to, go to your Web Art Design, go inside of Black Goose, and here's the file. So by default, it shows up with the icon of whatever is your default browser, and you can see it's an HTML file, which is the same as a web page. I hate Explorer or Edge or whatever this is. I don't know why that's my default browser. I don't want to see this in that. I want to see this. I can see it here in Notepad, but I also want to have it open in a browser. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose open with, I will open it with Chrome because I already have Chrome open. And so here it is as a web page. And you can see that it doesn't really look good. It needs what I'm going to call hierarchy. It needs some separation. Everything is at the exact same level. There's no spacing. I can't find like where the catering or the hours is because there's no hierarchy. Nothing's separated out, no regions. All right, I'm going to leave this open though. Don't close it because we're just going to keep refreshing. So we are going to start marking this up with some basic HTML tags. So the basic HTML tags that we're going to work with here will be the heading tags. So there are 6 of these, H1 all the way down to H6. They all open and close like this. The only difference is they have that /. So each heading by default has a style that we're going to eventually override, but for right now we're going to take advantage of that in that they are all bold, but they're all smaller and smaller. So the H1, whatever text I wrap the H1 tags around will be very large. Whatever text I put the H2 tags around will be smaller, H3 even smaller, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we're going to use this. We definitely have some text that should be headings. We also have text that is regular old paragraph text. Then to be able to control the length of our paragraph line, we're going to use the BR tag, which is the line break tag. Now in your book, he does use a different semantics for it, and you can use that one, or you can use this, which is also the way they have it on the W3 School site. One thing to notice about this tag is that it does not have a closing. So most of ours has an opening and a closing tag, but this one doesn't. We're also going to use the bold tag, B, and we're just going to pick some words and make them bold to stand out, give it a little hierarchy. What do we really want to stand out? Same thing with I for italics. The HR tag is going to give us a line. That's a really simple design element that's really powerful, and that can be used to create regions and separate things out. Also to point out, it doesn't have a closing tag. And the same thing in the book. He puts a forward slash in front of it, which you can use, or keep it like this. This is the way it's on the W3 School, so that's why I use it like this. So going back over to our text in Notepad, I'm going to start marking this up. What would I call a heading? What is the most important thing? I think is the name of the restaurant. So I am going to wrap that in the H1 tag. Okay, and now I'm just going to save this. You can see I have an unsaved change because it has an asterisk there. I'm going to save it, Control S, and I'm going to go back to my browser and I'm going to refresh, and you can see a difference. Okay, so two things. One, Black Goose Restaurant now is very large, it's bold, and something that's interesting is it's on its own line. It brought the rest of the text down. So that brings me back over to this point about block versus inline tags. So there are some tags that will automatically bring your text down to another line, and those tags would be the heading tags, the paragraph tag, and the horizontal rule. Other tags keep the content within the same space, within the same line. It doesn't bring it down. And so those would be our bold, italic, strong, and other ones that are in the book. So now back over to here. So we've marked this up as a heading. Black Goose Restaurant, because that is the most important thing, the name of the restaurant. So if I put these other headings, the restaurant and catering and location and hours, also at H1, they lose their hierarchy, meaning they all have the same level of importance. So instead, I'm going to make this an H2. And I'm going to close it out. And I'll make this one an H2 as well. But location and hours, I want it to be at an even lower level. So I have, these are like main subheadings, and then this is something different. So I'm going to make this actually an H3. Okay, let's save this and go back over to our browser and let's refresh. And as you can see, it brought everything that had the heading tag around it down onto its own line. So that's what I mean by block level. I can't make a word here an H1 because it would bring it down. That I would need a tag that could be inline. So you see how it creates that space. Okay, what else can we do here? I'm going to ask that you always have all of your text has tags around it. So that way, once we get into CSS, because the CSS targets specific tags, it can target those tags. So if this text here doesn't have a tag around it, and it doesn't, the CSS can never design it. So my blocks of text, I'm just going to designate as paragraphs. So you can pause this if you want, and then you go ahead and put these guys all as paragraphs. Whoops. Oh my gosh. Okay, even down here, I'm going to make this a all paragraph. So everything is basically marked up. And it is going to create additional space, but once we get into, but once we get into CSS, we're going to be able to figure out how to reduce that space. Okay, so what I'd like to do next is I'd like to bring some of these lines of text down so they're not so long. Okay, so I'm going to do that by using the BR tag. That's one of those tags I mentioned that doesn't have a closing. And I'm going to put it wherever I want it to bring the line of text down. So I'm going to put one here and here. So I'm just going to kind of use the way it looks already. And now I'm just going to copy and paste some. Okay, let's save it, Control S, and go over here and refresh. And you see how that brought these things down. So now it's starting to look a little bit better. There's huge chunks of space in between here because again, this is a paragraph and this is a heading, and both of those add space above it and below it. So I'm getting a ton of space. For right now, there's not much we can do about it. So we'll be able to fix that and close that up once we get into CSS. But some other things we can do, to create some regions, we could add the horizontal rule. So let's say I just want to add like a line at the bottom. I'm going to put the HR tag, for example, save it, refresh so we can see what that looks like. And that added this line, and that kind of helps close this off so it's not just drifting off into the white space. Maybe I'll add a line underneath the name of the restaurant as well. So go right up here and add the HR. Save it and refresh over here, and now I have that. So little things like this, spacing, whether things are bold or their size, and little bits of lines can really help be our first simple design elements. The last tags that I want to cover here would be the bold and italics tag. So there's actually a difference between how you want to make things bold. And in the book, it's going to talk about the bold versus strong, italics versus emphasize. So if you want to emphasize a word, and it's not just semantically being italicized, you should use the EM tag. And if you want to emphasize a word and say like it's a strong, as if you're saying it very loudly, like on sale now, then you'd want to use the strong tag. So I am using the B tag and the I tag, so that way I'm leaving those other two tags for you to be able to add on, because as part of your homework assignment in the recipes, you have to add some tags I haven't covered. So that's why I'm not covering those. So let's something, you have fun, we'll handle the cooking. Let's make this bold. And so even though I have sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. Even though this is within the paragraph tag, I can still have another tag inside. What's just really important is that you keep the opening and closing order. So in other words, I can't put this closing BR after the closing PR, because the opening B, I meant to say just B, not BR. The opening B starts after the paragraph tag. Does that make sense? So we open this, then this one opens, and then this one has to close before this one closes, because this is inside. And now let's add the I tag to make something italics. We'll make this, the menu changes regularly to highlight the freshest ingredients. Let's make this italics. So I'm going to just put an open I at the beginning, and at the end, my closing I. And it doesn't matter that I have this BR here and that this is inside other tags. That's all the way it's supposed to work. And so we'll refresh it. And there we go. Now we have something a little bit bold, and we have something in italics. It's just other ways that you can kind of create some hierarchy and differentiation so all the text doesn't ring together. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how can you make, with these very simple little bits of design elements, how can you make things pop out? So now lastly, we've been saving this all along, so I could just close Notepad right now. I see I don't have an asterisk here, so that means I haven't made any changes. I didn't save. I can close this and go back over to my folders. So when you submit this to me, you're just going to be going over to Blackboard. Oh, let's see if I have it over here. You're going to the Submit All Work. You're going to, so you're not submitting this assignment, you're submitting your recipes. You're going to be going over to this. You're just doing the recipes in the same way. And you're going to browse, and you're going to look for this file. So if you need to fix this, if you need to work on this file, if I just open this up, it's going to open up in a browser if I click on it. But if I want to open it up back in TextEdit or Notepad, I'm going to right click and say open with Notepad. Okay, and that's how I can get back to the editing stage. So I can, once you submit this file, I can see it both in Notepad and in the web page. Don't worry about that. All right. So you're going to be doing something similar with your recipes homework. You're going to take one recipe, and I want you to try to think about hierarchy and styling it, getting some space and things like that. Let me see if I can show you any past examples. Okay, so I had to find some past an example. So here's an example. One recipe, homemade brownie recipe. And in this one, she added some tags that I didn't cover and that are in the book, which is exactly what I want you to do. And this is the way one version looks, and she uses the horizontal rule, and various things are emphasized in bold, and this is the way the second version looks. So they're not dramatically different, but there are definitely some differences between the two. One has a lot more lines and a lot more regions. So just so you know, when I look at these, this is what I do. I right click and I do view page source, or I could open it up in Notepad. And this is how I can look at your text and all your HTML tags. And one of the first things I do is I look to see if there are any errors. So if there's an error, it'll show up in red. And let me show you what is the most common error. I know, I keep seeming like I'm about to end this video. Last thing I promise, okay? So let's just say I made where I made my thing that's italics, and then I goofed on my closing tag, so I didn't do it correctly here. See how I took out the I? I'm going to save this, go back to this page, and you see how everything afterwards is still in italics? That's because my closing tag didn't work, so it never closed, and everything else is staying as italics, so I have to fix that. And here's the last tag that I want you to add, the title tag. Okay, so the title tag is going to be what we see up in the tab. So we're going to call this Black Goose Home. I didn't put my closing tag. Closing title. Save it and refresh. And now in the tab it says Black Goose Home. Okay, I promise that's it. I'm not going to say anything more. End of video. Jump ahead to the next thing or get started on your homework.